We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So, good morning, everybody. Good morning. So we will start with Lions and Happy Bucks.
All right, well, let's do happy first. My wife, when we were, well, throw in a bunch here and some change, so I kept buying the one. My grandsons over vacation, they didn't like hearing ones, they like hearing the big bills, so I kept buying the ones from them. Say, here, I don't know if they've got the concept down yet or not, but I would still spend the same here. But, and that, I don't know what I was going to say. It was a very good vacation. It was nice to get away, nice to be back. We went to Cocoa Beach, Florida. We have a timeshare down there, and we took our time going back and kind of worked there and kind of hurried back. Bridget and Matt left Saturday because football practice started Monday and she had a meeting Monday, so they drove straight through. We got to Chattanooga, Tennessee, and Mary Kay does the driving. For some reason, she says I do this too much. She said she doesn't mind to look at that. It's just that I keep looking instead of in front of me. So she does most of the driving. It is good to be back. I'm glad to be with you guys. So anybody else? Happy Bucks. Back from back?
Yes. We just got back from Branson and Table Rock. Spending
That's my girl. Thank
a few
you.
days with my son, so that was awesome.
I got happy about 3 weeks ago. We are taking the express rapid train. The big part is from Chicago to Sacramento. It's the express train. I think it's 52 hours. So, and I quite listen to work. You know how trains eat and there's no escape.
This is gonna be a fine, this will not be a happy buck. Just saying.
I'll tell you how trains eat. They chew.
Oh, there you go.
That's a $2 fine.
Yeah. Wait, no, wait.
Hey, Jerry.
I'm gonna go all the way.
Okay. I'm happy to report that we had a wonderful trip to Detroit. Our Alex's wedding. And had a great time. Mom was with me. Everything was picture perfect all the way through. And we tried to come home. Trip home with it. 12-hour fiasco. We flew from Detroit to Chicago. Chicago shut down because of tornado warning. They evacuated the tax center. So there were no air traffic controllers to control the planes. Sent us back to Detroit. Landed again. Waited a couple hours. Sent back to Chicago. Caught our plane to St. Louis at 1:15 a.m. in the morning.
It was a quiet airport when you landed here.
It was actually not too as quiet as you would think. No, but Chicago was a zoo by the time we got there. And even when we left at 1 o'clock in the morning. Crazy. All the planes that were backed
I
up.
really enjoy flying anymore. No.
I must say, people, for the most part, with all of the promotion. There are a few people ranting and raving, but not like.
Not like you see on the video.
Yes.
There's $11.
Yeah.
I can't even remember what I counted for. So. I'm still on vacation. Any other happy bucks? Yes.
My sister successfully made it to Wyoming.
Yay!
Moved in to a new home and we got in it. I forget how long it was awesome. And it was a successful event.
Anybody else? Does everybody have their pen on? I don't have my pen. I do have this, but I don't have my pen, so it's only fair that I find myself when I have. Yep, all right, all right, all right.
We had a very successful event at Fort Leonard Wood this weekend. We examined a couple hundred soldiers, lots of tea. They're getting ready to deploy to our southern border. Oh, really? Never know. Last month, they were going to Germany. They were very happy about it.
And Ruth has one, she put another one in. Oh, I remember now what I was going to say. Threw me off. We have a timeshare in Cocoa Beach. We've owned it for about 19 years. It's nothing fancy like the big high rises. Basically, probably 40 years ago, they combined 2 hotels, and then 30 years ago, they built 2 high rise buildings. I was talking to my sister one day, who's also a coder. She said, "Why don't you have time now? Why don't you run for the board of directors for this?" And I did, put my name in, and I lost in the election. However, one of the board members resigned during the election period of time with proxies, and I was appointed as a board member on this. So now I get to go to Florida, and actually he says they're tax deductible.
I think so.
So
Yeah.
I'm on the board of directors. So
Keep that mileage.
yeah, and they'll pay for one night of my stay at the respective timeshare. So
For you.
I'm excited about that, and we'll see. And Mary Kay said, "Do we have extra insurance?" And I said, "Yes, we do."
Make sure you have your repair company to be done.
That's what we're gonna try to do, especially on the beach. So.
Bob, would you like to introduce our program?
Yeah, pleasure. Great pleasure. You were such a wonderful teacher. Here we go, Heather, he's gonna start.
An interesting person, and I'm looking forward to hearing what he has to say.
I am too.
Was he one of your teachers, Bob?
You know, Heather, I never thought I'd have you in class again, but here you are. Heather was my student. You'd have been, Heather, we're gonna wind up giving away your age. And I know you're not 18. You'd have been 13. So how many years ago would that have been?
Good answer.
Anyway, Heather would come into my 6th hour, I believe, wasn't it? First seat by the windows, am I right? Every day with that little smile, with an attitude that didn't quit, eager to learn, a wonderful personality, flashing those brown eyes. But anyway, Heather wound up graduating, and I went on and retired, and something brought us together back in, I think, 2011.
Yes, no, 20, no. Well, whatever.
Yes,
Yeah, it's about 20.
and we ate at the Mandarin House with your mother. Okay. So anyway, in the hi, Jack. Jack Williams,
Okay.
can you hear me?
Yeah.
I can hear you.
What, Jack?
I
Always
said
wanted-
hello. So nice to see you.
Good to see you. Anyway, Heather mentioned that morning at dinner and lunch and conversation, she had never gotten a Rittner class ring for whatever the reason. And so, Heather, why don't you finish that story?
Oh.
You want me to tell it? Anyway, the superintendent's my best friend. And he knew the company that made those rings. And here it is, I don't know, October, they weren't in the ring business. And they cut a special ring for Heather. And I assume you still have it. All right. Anyway, we're going to go down memory lane today, literally. And how many of you this morning can picture Woodson Road from Lackland down to Midland? Just anybody in this room not familiar with
Lackland to Midland, Woodson Road. Can everybody put your hands up if you can picture that stretch? All right, I'm gonna take you building by building in 1956, and you're gonna get some surprises. You're gonna find out, for example, that Overland had a theater. If you can picture Heather Walgreens. Everybody picture Walgreens on the corner? When I was growing up, that was Bob and Glenn's mobile station. And the emblem then for mobile was the red flying horse, Pegasus. And they had one on a pole that was neon lit, huge, and it would turn at night. And you can see that you can see it down the page. Across the street where Dobbs is now was a converted house, and it was McConnell's Country Kitchen Restaurant. And they specialized in chicken in a basket. And we thought that was a big deal in 1956. They had fried chicken in a wicker basket with a red gingham napkin and French fries. Very good, wonderful chicken. And they would serve their food in a basket. And that was their claim to fame. Okay? If you cross the street where they tore down Jack in the Box, can everybody picture that? Hear this now. That was a Studebaker dealership. It was Pepperman Studebaker Motors. And I can remember, I don't guess you guys, maybe you're not up on old classic cars. Al, do you remember the bullet nose Studebakers? Well, they were all lined up there at Pepperman Motors. Across the street, there's a tire broker, used to be the tire broker. There's an auto repair place that was always a gas station. But next door to it was St. Louis County Cleaners. That's back when everybody had their clothes dry cleaned frequently. And it was big enough that it had a big smokestack, and they would clean on premises. Next door was what today is the Rittner Administration Building, Jerry. But then it was rented to what was the formation of the St. Louis County Special School District. And some very challenged kids were in that building that needed a lot of extra help. Across the street, it's now a church. It was the Overland Bank. The Charter Bank of Overland. Sue, I know you remember that. And Overland notables like Jack Heil and Mr. Vogel. You remember Jack Heil? Anybody? They were officers in that bank. Next door was Velvet Freeze. On that, today it's a parking lot, and you could go into Velvet Freeze and get hand-dipped ice cream. And they had something that us kids thought was unique. It was an early version of a microwave oven. And you could get a lamb shower hamburger sandwich, either plain or cheeseburger. You put it in that thing and it would warm it up in a matter of moments. We was probably getting nuked. But we thought that was a big deal. Okay? All right, now you're up to Marlowe, the side street. The next building today is Q and Cushion. That started out being Kroger, and then it was National Food Store. All right, come one building north with Spencer Moving Company. They dealt in cross country. They had vans. You could move to California using Spencer Moving. The next door, which is today Chimmy's Mexican restaurant, was Western Auto. And you could go in there and get parts for your bicycle. They'd sell you a washer or a dryer and a lawnmower, or you could buy a hunting rifle. Yep. Across the street was Sutter Plumbing. Oscar P. Sutter was the proprietor, and he went back in Oakland, I think, his family to the Civil War. Noted doctor, gynecologist doctor, Roy Walther. Bob, you remember Dr. Walther?
Yeah.
He lived in that house that's right there by Sutter Plumbing. And had an office in the back. All right, let's come down to, of course, Bauman's Funeral Home. And next to Bauman's is a green grassy lot. You know what was there at one time, Mitch, don't you?
Bakery, laundry.
Yes, and then Haas. Now, I'll tell you something about Ken Crowder because not too many people know this, Heather. When I was like 10, 11, we figured out that the bakery at 5 o'clock every evening would take perfectly good stuff, they called it day old, to a dumpster. And I'm talking stolens and cheesecakes. We'd hide in the woods. And they'd come out and they put that in there and we'd come in like fish hawks, just boom, off of our bicycles, and we'd get perfectly good cheesecakes out of there and eat them with our hands, had it all over our face. And stolen cherry and apricots and, all right. Then there's the Overland Municipal Parking Lot, Heather. Can you picture that? That was a very Art Deco building, the Overland Theater, in that entrance to the parking lot, and it burned. And you could go there and see Roy Rogers and Dale Evans, Western movies, the Gene Autry, the Singing Cowboy, and I think they charged $25 for the feature movie. Okay. The next building there was Mason's Furniture Company, and you could get a whole house full of furniture at Mason's. Reasonable. And then coming down that side, where Overland Hardware is now, anybody know Dr. George Albin and his wife Stacy? Their family, where Overland Hardware is now, owned a laundry. Albin Laundry, and it was in the building where Overland Hardware is right now. Okay? You might go, in your mind, if you in your mind go into Overland Hardware, there's a section there, kind of a narrow place off of the edge of the store where they have fencing and stuff back in there. That was an optometrist office, Dr. M.S. Eichler. And that little place wasn't much wider than one of these tables. And I would go in there and get my glasses, and he fitted me with sunglasses. That was a big deal because I was cool. And anyway, even then I was a car guy, Sue. And what made it so special with Dr. Eichler, he owned the Packard. He had a 56 Packard, which was the last model they ever made. All right, next door. Let's go on the west side of the street. Where Overland Optical used to be Ludwig Toys. And before that, Ludwig was in the hardware business, but then they switched to toys. Subsequently, they moved down to Town and Country Mall, and then eventually went out of business. Of course, the diner, my mom and dad came to Overland in 1946, and that diner was there. Yeah.
Same food.
So then across the street, let's go back to the John Seals Insurance Office. Can you picture that? Right along there was a shop for baby clothing up to about age 10. I think you could get uniforms for parochial school too, called the Chick Shop, CHIC shop, and a lady we called her Mrs. Lynch, ran that, a very personable lady. Next door to that was, remember Marty Brockman? You remember Brockman's? Anybody remember Marty Brockman? Brockman Radio and Television? Well, that was right there, and next door to him, he had an aunt that ran a gift shop and a Hallmark card shop. And they were all related to the Brockmans, all kind of one family. You go next door to picture the diner, Heather. You picture that diner, and between the diner and the next building is an empty place that got concrete tables. Picture that, Mitch? That was a walk-up A&W root beer stand. And one of these deals, it was seasonal, and the front of it dropped down and made that into a counter. And you could buy a frosted mug of A&W root beer, just walk up there for a dime, and they'd sell you a mug of root beer in a frosted mug. That was a big deal in 56. Next door was Riders, R-Y-D-E-R-S, Riders Inn, and it was an upscale bar. Now today it's just Bill's, and it's not exactly upscale. But then notables would come there to spend the evening, and Mr. Ryder was wealthy. And I kind of think he had a connection to the mob. That's, and you remember when the car blew up, and somehow he was involved in that, and mysteriously he moved to Florida immediately. I remember when that car blew up. I heard it that evening. Anyway, next to Riders was Friedman's Yard Goods, where you could go in and buy yard goods to make your own dress or whatever. And then right there, Sue, where Erickson Plaza is today, was F.W. Woolworth. And they had a lunch counter. And you could go in there and get a bacon tomato club sandwich and a cherry coke. It was a typical 1950s dime store. And then if you notice right there, the street kind of curves. There was a building there, Art Deco. Dr. Wilson, the dentist. You might remember Dr. Wilson. You remember him?
Yeah.
The eye doctor, Dr. Levine, was in there. And that building was Art Deco with a glass block front on that corner. You come on around the curve, there was a barber shop and a shoe repair, Tony's. And then you got into that building that is today's Specialty Awning. And that was Gross Air, they called it. Mr. Grossenbacher had a heating and air conditioning company, and they even made their own furnaces. And by the way, that building at one time was a Hudson dealership. Now, can you picture the little chiropractor's office right there across from Specialty Awning? That was the first Overland Fire Department. And they actually had a fire truck in that building, an old timer. And that's a long time ago. Where Save-A-Lot is today was National Food Store, and then it was some kind of a video place, and then it was empty, and now it's Save-A-Lot. Let's go across the street to Quick Trip. You remember that building, Bob? Shaped like a triangle? Remember it, Sue? It was 905 Liquor. Remember that?
Yeah.
And then they turned it into an antique store, and then eventually it was demolished for Quick Trip.
Cleaner.
That's right. Now, the Midwood building. At one time, that was state of the art. It had an elevator, it had all kinds of different professional offices, and it turned into a dive. So it got so bad that Overland literally had, well, Overland bought it. And I was with the mayor and the chief of police the day the Overland lawyers told Overland that you got to go down there because there was people, living and renting those rooms. All of them had been out of jail about 10 minutes. So Overland was told by the lawyers that you got to go down there and tell them that this is now property of the city and give them 30 days to move out. Okay. So somehow I wound up in the delegation to go down there. It was Mayor Snyder, Community Director of Development Kirby Bernard, the Chief of Police, and I, and we went in police cars. And we pulled up in front of that building and we went into that little lobby, about the size of this square. Everybody in there got up and ran out the door. Because they saw the chief of police, they saw the police cars, all of them I'm sure had broken probation, So they all got on motorcycles and junk cars and away they went. That place cleared out in 5 minutes or less. So I'm trying to think where that the laundry on the corner that was a Chinese restaurant, that was Edward Goki Real Estate. Remember Mr. Goki? and he owned property all over. And he used to live in that house on Midland that was designed by Frank Lloyd Wright. Out there, I think it's Poe. Is it Poe? That was designed by Frank Lloyd Wright, and that was Mr. Goofy's home. So, that is Overland in 1956, from Lackland down to Midland.
Miss Sandra.
Sandros, came on later, Rich. And I also, the building, the low building across from down, something Novelty.
Yeah, that was
A and P. And the name A and P goes back to the American Revolution. The tea that they dumped in the harbor belonged to the Great Atlantic and Pacific Tea Company. So we got that in there for American history, Kevin. So anyway, any questions about any of that? Because that's the way it was when I was growing up.
What was the pawn shop on the corner down the other wedge, across from Woolworth? That existed there.
Tell me again.
Across from
Oh,
Woolworth.
Tucker Madden Jewelry. And Mrs. Madden was one of these, she looked like a Olivia de Havilland. She wore diamonds and a fur coat, and she would come to work every morning. You'd have thought she was from Hollywood. And out in front, Mitch, they had a clock, neon lit, that said Tucker Madden. That's the reason they're putting one at Overland Plaza to mimic this. So, all right. Any questions about Overland? Al?
You took us through $1 million building a couple of months or a year ago. How'd that turn out? What's happening?
On page?
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you, listen good to this. It's like class, the side talking on
Where's
the
side
other.
topic? Sorry.
Al, that was the record center for military records.
Right, but
In the 70s, it caught on fire. Anybody remember that? Cassius, don't you remember when the record center was, I bet you got papers, burned pieces floating into your yard.
So, let me tell you a story about the records.
Go ahead.
For those of you that don't know, and I know Heather doesn't, I did pest control for quite a few years. We were contacted by the record center, by GSA, to do mold control on the records that were hit by the water. So what they did was massive warehouse. So they just laid the boxes, an aisle for me to walk through, another box, an aisle, and so on. And we went down with this product to spray very lightly with a mold control product. Being the history buff that I am, I stopped to read a few, like General Patton, like Omar Bradley. Those were the records on paper that were stored there.
didn't they say Elvis Presley's were in there too?
I didn't find that. I just, something caught my eye. After a while, I figured out I'm spending more time reading than I am working, and somebody's gonna get an idea that maybe I should be doing something different. So I started to pick up the pace a little bit. But that's what it was.
I can add to that story. My ex-mother-in-law, who's since passed on, was a military archivist there. She was responsible at one time for condensing the files concerning the death march. Something like 80 quarter file cabinets full of material.
Sure.
And they were gonna package this all up and send it to the National Archives, I guess, in Washington DC for permanent storage. So I guess after the fire and the water damage, she's getting into these files and she ingested some kind of red mold or something, got into her system. To where she had to leave St. Louis because every summer it would bloom and she couldn't even breathe. She ended up going out to El Paso and going to work for the Army out there as a military historian. But that was her experience in working at the records.
Wow.
And I have a story.
Cool, Mitch.
A good friend of mine, dad, worked for a company back in, who worked on Windows. They did the records. And one of the problems that the firemen had was they couldn't bust through the glass. Because this material they had put on to block the sun Sure was so strong.
Mary Kay's father was the treasurer of the credit union.
Yes.
Now it's joined with the teachers credit union, Spanish credit union. They called him to come over and help move out as many of the files that they could for the credit union. He did.
Something?
Jack Williams, you have a question, buddy?
Yes, sir. My question had to do with the Overland hardware store. And what year did it, if you can remember, it
I can.
moved into that location? And was it at another location before then?
All right, Jack, can you picture Alvin's dentist office
Yeah,
on Midland?
yeah.
All right, next to that is a kind of a low brick building on the west side of Alvin. Can you picture that, Jack?
Yeah, yes.
That was the original, it was a big kind of a frame building. That's where Overland Hardware started out.
Oh, okay.
When the laundry became available, they moved up onto Woodson Road.
Okay. And do
Yeah.
you know what year that was, Ken, or
I would
approximately?
say along about 55, 54. I can remember going to the first one with my dad to buy various things when it was on Midland. And then they moved up there into what had been the Alvin Laundry on Woodson. Jack, it's good to see you, man. I wish you was here so I could shake your hand.
Likewise.
All right. But anyway, getting back out, that multi-million dollar building,
Yeah.
that was gonna be one huge white elephant.
Yeah, I know.
They built a new building in Spanish Lake for military records. That building was labeled obsolete, was gonna be left standing, they're just gonna walk away from it. Well, you know how that would have turned out. Every window that could be reached with a lock would have been broken out. Right?
They would have tried.
Sure. So my friend, and let's not get into politics now, but my buddy Mayor Snyder said, we even let that happen. Okay? So he met with Congressman Clay, Senator Blunt, Secretary of Agriculture, and Snyder did all the talking. He said, that's a fine building located here in access to an interstate highway. 170 takes you to 40, 64, 170 takes you to 70. What do you mean obsolete? That's priceless property. What's wrong with you guys? Well, apparently he got them to thinking. Because today it's the Department of Agriculture on one floor, Department of Veterans Affairs on the bottom floor. And there's like 200 people that come to work there every day. They've completely remodeled the building. You've been there with me and it's a beautiful place.
Right.
It could have been a white elephant.
Right there across from the zone.
Yeah, I know it is. Presidel is the post office. I can't think of the name of that building, but give me a minute and I will. So, yes, sir.
So you didn't mention anything about the medical center. Is that-
All right, the medical center. I'll tell you about you'll see why I skipped it. Not really. The medical center was built there in 1958. Okay. And Dr. Hartstein, you ever hear the name Dr. Jack Hartstein, ophthalmologist?
Yeah.
World renowned. You know Garth Brooks, the singer? He worked on him, okay? The skin doctor was in there, Dr. Rothweiler, the ear specialist. It was a thriving place. It opened up, Brian, in 1958. And in 1959, in February the 10th, I was sleigh riding with my friends and was involved in an accident, and I cut my leg bad right here. Still got the scar. And at that time, Overland Medical Center had a big sign, emergency, didn't say emergency room, emergency services. So my dad was at work, snow halfway up on this podium, And back then, we got delivery at our house on Addy Avenue behind Orton, steel test milk delivered in bottles in a little truck to the house. So this is going on and I'm bleeding and my mom's trying to put on a tourniquet. The milk truck driver put me in the truck and took me to Overland Medical Center. Imagine that, the liability. So the doctors looked at that and they could see that it was going to involve surgery and stitches, and they weren't equipped for that. So my mom went to a payphone and called my dad, who worked at the Federal Reserve Bank. And he came out, he was a security guy. He came out, come into the lobby with his gun, he's, like a security guy, and told those guys at the desk, and I'm getting goosebumps because my dad, Sue, was my hero. It's like growing up with a Lone Ranger. He told them at the desk, you guys didn't take care of my boy. I'll be back to see you. And he's wearing a gun. Can you imagine? So we got in my dad's 54 Chevrolet and we went over to St. Mary's Hospital in Clayton. And went into the emergency room and Dad went in there again, full regalia. And that was all, at that time, Catholic nuns were nurses. And the sister was there, and he said, I want you to point me to the best surgeon in this building. My boy's out here, he's hurt bad. And she said, well, sir, he's in consultation down the hall. He said, what room? He just went down there, barged into a meeting, and got the doctor by the arm. He said, I need you, man, come up. And that doctor put 38 stitches in my leg right here and saved my leg. And the Lone Ranger came to my rescue. When he wasn't on silver, he was driving a 54 Chevy Bel Air. My dad. All right. What else can I tell you?
What's the rest of the story? Did you go back and take care of the old?
He went down there as a gentleman because he couldn't be a gentleman. But see, this guy, my dad, was 6th Infantry World War II. That's the guys that whooped the world. And would do it again if they could get to their feet. But he could be a gentleman. And he wanted them to know that if y'all aren't going to offer emergency services, you ought to really take that sign down. Kind of makes sense. Any questions?
Yeah.
Yes.
Not related to that particular, but my mother was an osteopathic physician. She went to Kirksville. And back when she practiced medicine, there weren't EMTs in every town, And so growing up, if we drove by a bad car wreck, she would be bothered because as a physician, they called the doctor out to the scene of the crash, and steering columns were straight, they weren't breakaway.
Well, dash knobs were like little rockets.
So she did more than her share of helping get people out of bad wrecks and had to give them morphine or something so they don't share it moving. So that's talking about emergency services back then. It was not like now if you have bad wreck, you have someone really well trained right there with you.
Well, there wasn't any 911.
Right.
Artman's Funeral Home and Artman's Funeral Home and Overland Garage. Al, you remember Overland Garage?
I don't think so. I'm kind of new to this.
They had an ambulance, did Thomas,
Yeah, we ran in.
and those guys didn't have much training.
No, it's scoop and run.
That's right.
Scoop and run.
But,
Honestly,
yes, sir. What is your name? I seems like I should know you.
Oh, you shouldn't. No. My name is Todd Lindley.
Dennis,
I'm a dentist.
you have a patient by the name of Rich Pater.
I cannot
Yeah, you
say
do.
whether I do or not.
And he brags on you all the time. He went there with a toothache and left without a toothache
Yeah.
and without the tooth.
I grew up in a little tiny town over the middle of the oil field in Illinois. And when I was a little kid, our phone, you picked it up and you talked to somebody. And my dad was a veterinarian. And he was best friend with the local doctor, about 1,000 people in the town. The doctor came over for lunch about once a week, and didn't matter whether he checked in with the operator or not. they could find him. And our phone would ring and they said, oh, we need to talk to Dr. Myotis. And he'd get on the phone and he knew them all by their voice. He said, Carol, what do you need? And the police department phone number was 1. Fire department was 2. Ambulance was 3. And I found an old phone book years and years later, and I was just amazed. Because, you know, as a kid, there was no dial, and finally we got a dial, and we had to use the last 4 digits, and then we went totally high tech, and you had to use all 7 digits. But my brother by that time had moved to Europe and lived in Austria, and more than one time, we still had to use the operator, and we said, I need a long distance operator. And I'd say, okay, I want to make a call to Austria, and here's the number. And a minute or 2 later, phone would ring, and the guy would say, good day, mate. And I'm like, I hope it's not 3 in the morning. I was trying to call Austria, not Australia. Yeah, well, the person was in Australia. It was the international operator that had a hard time with my Southern Illinois accent. You know, I thought you'd be in Australia. No, but things were simpler back then.
Well, Todd, can I tell a Bob Katzif story? Because you brought something to mind here. This is a true story.
Yep.
Now you can't be side talking to him.
It was on also.
Anyway, I have all of my teeth. I think I've got 1 cavity, but about 8, maybe 9 years ago, I had a toothache, the kind that you can feel every heartbeat. You know, Dr. Lindell.
Oh, yeah.
And it's night. And of course, I've known Bob and Sue Katzif a long time, and I called your house. You remember that? Well, I do. And it's 9:30 at night. He said, well, come over. Now, you think this is Mayberry and Andy Griffith, you know, and Barney. So I went over to the Katzif's house with a toothache at 9:30 at night. He said, lay down on the couch. He said, wait a minute. He said, I got to go out to the car and get my flashlights. Remember that? So you went out to your car and got the flashlight and looked at my tooth and did something. I don't know, you did something, but I made it to the next morning, and then Mike took care of it. But that's the way, that's Overland, you know, is like a little town in a metropolitan area, and you call your dentist at 9:30 and he says, come to the house. Hell.
I have, you touched back with me, I'll have to take you back a little bit further. I was a car hop in 1947, and talk about the Studebekers. I live in Pennsylvania. There was a Studebaker dealer.
Picture that.
And one of the salesmen came up for a orange drink every day, gave you a $50 tip.
Oh, yeah.
And I mean to tell you, that was quite a tip in 47. And then when I quit Hamburger Heaven, I went down the street to Velvet Trees.
When I talked about it,
So
the one I talked about or the one I'm on?
no, I'm talking one on Olive, that's the way. You get my life there a long time ago.
Yes.
I will say, in the probably 90s, the service from Katzif Medical Group was about the same. Bridget had braces. One of the wires popped loose. Mary Kay called Dr. Mike. And he said, well, come on out to the house. We'll take care of that. And he used a fork and a multi-tool. I'm sure he did. I'll cover your son. I'm sure he did. They put that wire back in. Yep. Yep. So.
Brian, do I have any more time? Is my time up?
You got about 5 more minutes.
Okay.
But I gotta take 30 seconds. So I gotta know what was in the barbecue now, what was there.
There was, yeah. That building was, the next one there was Mason Furniture, and that building was, I think, added on at one point. About the time that theater burned down, because the theater was right there. And it was an Art Deco building, with a fancy front. Anyway, can I tell one more? All right. Does anybody know the story of the Overland time capsule?
Yes. Front of the city hall.
Well, yes. I'll tell it quick. But this is really worth listening to because it's unbelievable. I retired, Heather, in 2010, and I thought, well, what am I going to do now? And the first day of retirement day, I'm sitting in my living room watching the noon news. I never watched the noon news, but I was. And they came on making fun of Overland. And it was in the front yard of the city hall with then Community Development Director Chuck Boone. And Overland was having a centennial, and they was going to dig up the time capsule, but they lost the file and couldn't find it. And they couldn't find the file or the capsule. So Channel 2's out there making fun of the record-keeping system, you know, trying to make the case that Overland's a bunch of Hoosiers. So Chuck Boone looks at the camera and said, if anybody knows where that time capsule is, call me. I got in my truck, I went straight up there. Chuck is still my friend. I said, Chuck, I know where it is. He said, no. He said, bullshit. He said, you don't know where that is. I said, yes, I do. I said, I watched them bury it. It was 1959, and they were putting it in the ground one evening about 4 o'clock after a ceremony. And I was on my bicycle right there by the city hall, watching those guys bury that capsule in a child's vault that Al Ortman gave them. And I remembered. So he said, well, come on up here. He said, he gave me a piece of rebar, a rod. And we went out in the front yard. He said, poke around there. He said, what do you think it might be? Bob Katz said, you know, I hit that with the first plunge. He couldn't believe that. After all those years, we found the time capsule and dug it up. And what caused it to deteriorate, it had been by the flagpole. And they moved the flagpole to make the sidewalk wider. The tractor excavator was heavy. It crushed that vault and water got in it. But in there was a historic plate, a ballpoint pen, said Ortman's. A couple, a dime, a quarter, and a nickel, copy of the Post-Dispatch, various photographs from Overland history, but the whole thing had been infiltrated with water. Can I tell a quick joke?
Oh, no.
Now you heard this, so your time out, okay? Heather, I want you, you know, you probably don't listen to Alan Jackson, do you? Do you know who that is? Well, he sings a song about the Chattahoochee River. Chattahoochee something.
That's right.
Well, anyway, this story happened in Morgan, Alabama, Jerry, on the Chattahoochee, whatever it is, river, on a Saturday morning, and the Baptist minister was baptizing by immersion in that river, out on a gravel road, and come stumbling down the road was the town drunk, and he was really messed up. And so the elder, the deacon, said, Pastor, why don't we at least offer this drunk a relationship with Jesus? So the elder went over to this guy and he says, sir, would you like to find Jesus today? And the drunk was so plastered, he just signed up for the American Legion. So they took him down to the river. The pastor dumped him under the water hell. You heard this yesterday.
I sure did.
And they brought him up. And the pastor said, brother, did you find Jesus? And the drunk said, no, sir, I didn't find no Jesus. Took him down the second time. Brought him up, dripping. Brother, did you find Jesus? No, sir, no Jesus. They put him down time number 3, left him down a little longer, hell. Brought him up, you know, brother, did you find Jesus? And the drunk thought a minute. He said, are you sure this is where he fell in?
Alan Jackson's song doesn't have anything about that. Of him making out in the
Tell that
car.
to Dave Shepherd, will you? And real quick, when Heather and I were side talking at one point, it was because you jogged something for us. So here's it. The stone front building across from Quick Trip has been abandoned for years, next to Richardson. Yes. Okay, what was that?
Right there, you know, right there, next to Richardson was kind of a sleazy bar at one time, and it was an Irish theme. And what makes that notorious is it was a hang up the gangsters. And one time when I was about 12, somebody was in there that somebody didn't like, and they machine gunned in front of that building in a passing car. So naturally, us cheesecake eating kids, we went down there the next day and went to put our fingers in those holes where the bullets hit the brick. But anyway, that building that you're talking about has been various things, Jerry. The latest, it was a carpet distributing company. And I want you to know that it's in bad shape. Overland has court action against them, and it's going to be torn down between now and when. Yeah, they're going through litigation. They jumped all the hoops. It's not long for this world. All right.
Want to see the bullet hole? Is the bullet hole still there?
The building's gone.
That's gone.
Okay.
The building's gone.
It was between Richardson and the hotel,
I'm
right?
trying to think.
I think it was between the two.
Yes, yeah. And it had an Irish, had shamrocks on the wings.
This is the only way to do
And would you like to pull a winning ticket?
Thank you, folks. All right, I'm looking at 680-876.
Earlier.
Might be you.
Hey, then what? I
Then
think
you-
I lost mine.
Well, mine is not yours.
Chances
It's
I
gotta
got,
be yours.
there's one next to me and.
What did I do? Did it back?
No.
Did I win?
It's yours.
Yeah.
Well,
Not yet.
Okay, so right now, we're at over $200.
You want an opportunity.
You want an opportunity to win over $200. So there is a joker in here. You start off with a full
Every
deck of
step.
cards.
Not unlike.
That right over the.
There's a joker in here. If you pull it out, you win. If not, it rolls over to next week. And we're down to this key card.
Well, this must be it.
Oh.
Oh.
Man. So you see, there's still a joker left. So this one up.
How many are left? Yeah.
Not many. Fewer now.
Seven.
Seven.
We're down to seven.
Better buy 2 tickets next week.
So a couple things real quick. Next week, we're doing, member orientation for Heather as our program. So we'll be doing that,
I'll bring the goat.
here and online.
I have a question.
Yes.
I think I toured the record center with the Rotary Club.
We did.
Anybody else? Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not easy to get in there.
Yeah, the record, I remember I was there, but I can't remember how I got there.
Because we literally had to take off our shoes. That's right. And our belts, everything.
There it goes, right.
Go ahead. That's all right. I've got bad, so.
I was also gonna say, and don't forget, on the next time Ken's here, I'll talk about the 1856 when he was a little kid.
Okay, Brian. All right.
I have two
Thank
news.
you.
I'm going to start out with the good news and I'll do the bad news. If I can think of good news to follow that, that's Mary Kay's boss calls that an excrement sandwich. Good news is Ken, and he probably would never bring this up himself, was one of the, I think, the originator of, I know, Rittner Juniors and Rittner Middle's canned food drive. And it may have been, was it the original one for the school district?
Well, we started in a discussion in 1982 at $6. And then the next year, the challenge came, and then it lost.
And it was over hundreds of thousands of items of food and fruit brought in 1 year. My homeroom wanted to be, because I think yours, and it may have, no, it wasn't after you retired, it may have been before. So my group brought in a whole lot of pennies, dimes, and quarters, and this is what I love about the Whitney generation. Kids are not wealthy by any means, but they are so giving, and I gathered all that money and added quite a bit to it myself. And on a technicality, my group had a lot of, we won the can group, the food drive that year, but it was because the Save-A-Lot, or whatever was that corner at that time, was running ramen noodles for a ridiculous, and I bought every case of ramen noodles they had.
Each one of those
I think we
guys-
sorted them that year.
Each one of them counted as one. So I brought, I had to buy a cart to carry all this up to my room. So,
Well, that was the beginning of what today is Japan. Which, by the way, they're gonna cut the ribbon on that building, August the 28th, and everybody's invited.
The bad news, unfortunately, I did get a couple of letters right before I left for vacation from Missouri RILA. And the bad news is since one of our attendees did not attend and did not let us know, let RILA know, we will not get a refund for that person to attend. That is the bad news, and I feel terrible about that. I'm going to bring up a proposal to the board at the next board meeting to kind of take care of that, to maybe ask the parents for a $100 deposit that they will get back after their student completes RILA. I feel absolutely devastated. I know how hard it is for us to raise that money. But Valerie, the director, even called the night before, and the good news, I was able to find some good news here. Our youngster that we sent and did attend, Nakai Steele Myers, who will soon be Nakai Floyd. His father is one of the football coaches with my son-in-law. Sent us a letter. It said, Missouri RILA Academy has been an amazing experience for me. I feel like I've grown a lot more with understanding myself. Thank you very much for the opportunity to come. A personal highlight for me was the party on Tuesday night. Best DJ I have ever been in my life. Became because I got the chance to not be serious and actually calm down. It would be great to thank you in person. I truly appreciate the chance that you gave me. So I will be contacting him for a future program. So it was the sandwich. Bad news sandwich by 2 pieces of food.
And I say one more thing. Anyway, everybody said you gotta listen to this.
Oh, wonderful.
And then somebody did some figuring on me and my career, and somebody came up, from the time I started in 71 to 2010, I probably had like 5,000 students.
You did what?
I probably had in my class around 4,500 to 5,000 students. You know, I can't remember all of those names. They want you to. But Heather, I want you to know your teachers probably. And I remember when you left, and I cried. I recall you. Guys, I gotta go.
All right.
Have a good day.
Okay, tonight. We'll see y'all next week.